everyone, and welcome to Kiki Crochet. In this video tutorial we are going to learn how to crochet step by step the bow stitch. This is a very easy and very simple stitch. We can use it to make blankets, we can use it to make scarves, you can use it to make bags, you can use it in many projects. You can combine it with other stitches as well, or you can only make one bow throughout your project. Okay, just because we're learning to crochet the bows, this does not mean that you have to make the whole project full of bows. You can make it in any way that you prefer. Okay, now the rule for this stitch is multiples of 13 plus 1. So this means in order to create only one bow we need 13 plus 1 chains. Okay, and the repeating rows are row 2 to row 5. So every bow is made of 4 rows. Now let's see how we're gonna start to create the stitch, and in the end, as we have done in other stitches as well, we're gonna see how by using your sample we can calculate the stitches and rows needed to create a bigger project. So let's see how to start. I have started with my chain and have worked a total of 27 chains. This means 2 times the multiple of 13 plus 1 chain that I need to turn to the first row. Now, from the total chains that we have in the first row, we're going to have 1 less stitch. So I have 27 chains. I'm going to have 26 single crochet in row 1. So I'm going to start crocheting from the second chain. So 1, 2, put your hook in that second chain and work 1, next chain, 2, next one, 3, next one, 4, next one, 5, and keep crocheting 1 single crochet in every chain across for a total of 26 single crochet. Your last stitch is going to be right over here. I have completed working my 26 single crochet, and now we're going to start row 2, which is the first row of repetitions. So I'm going to chain 1, I'm going to turn my work, and starting from the first stitch I'm going to work 1 single crochet in each of the first 3 stitches. 1, 2, and 3. Now we're going to start creating the loops for the bow. So I'm going to chain 7, and I want you to be aware, I don't want you to crochet the chains tightly. I want you to crochet them loosely, so the project opens up nicely as we go through the rows, because if you crochet the chains tightly, your bows are going to be shrinking in. Okay, so chain 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. I'm going to skip 7 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And starting from the 8th stitch, I'm going to work 6 single crochet in a row. 1, next stitch, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now I'm going to create my second bow again by chaining 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Again, I'm going to skip 7 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And starting from the 8th stitch, I'm going to work the last 3 single crochet of the row. 1, next stitch, 2, and my last stitch, 3. Okay, so this is what we have at this point. I started with 3 single crochet, my chains for the bow, 6 single crochet, the chains for the bow, and I finished with 3 single crochet. So I finish in the same exact way as I started. Now we're going to start row 3, which is the second row of repetitions, and we're going to follow the same exact steps. So chain 1 and turn your work. Work 1 single crochet in each of the first 3 stitches. 1, 2, and 3. Chain 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Skip your chains of the previous row, and starting from the first single crochet, work your 6 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Chain 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 for the second bow. Okay, skip all of the chains of the previous row, and starting from the first stitch, work your last 3 single crochet of the row. 1, 2, and the last stitch, 3. Now we're going to start row 4, which is the third row of repetitions, and again we're going to follow the same exact steps. Chain 1, turn your work, and starting from the first stitch, work your first 3 single crochet. 1, 2, and 3. Chain 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Skip the 7 chains from the previous row, and starting from the first stitch, work your 6 single crochet. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Chain 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Skip the 7 chains of the previous row, and starting from the first stitch over here, work your last 3 single crochet. 1, next stitch, 2, last stitch, 3. So this is what we have at this point. So if you're making a bigger project, and just in case, just to avoid counting your rows, before you close the bow, you always need to have 3 rows of the chains, okay? And then in the next row, you're going to close those 3 rows together to form the bow. So next row, row 5, is the 4th and last row of repetitions. Chain 1, turn your work, start by working 1 single crochet in the first 3 stitches. 1, 2, 3, and now we're going to create our first bow. So I'm going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to put my crochet hook below the first row of chains, okay, below the first chain, right over here. Okay, take the yarn, pull it under your chains, bring the loop up so it reaches the same height as the loop on your crochet hook. Grab the yarn and pull through those 2 loops to create a single crochet. Now chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and starting from the first stitch right over here, work your 6 single crochet. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So right here we have our first bow. And even though that we're working the bow, we still have sorry, our 7 stitches. The first 3 are my chains, the fourth one is the single crochet, and the other 3 are my other 3 chains. Now for the second bow we're gonna work the same steps. So chain 3, 1, 2, 3. Put your hook beneath the 3 chain loops, right over here. Bring up the yarn and work your single crochet. Chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and starting from the first stitch right over here, I'm going to work the last 3 for the row. 1, 2, and 3. So here we completed working our bows. So now the next row, which is going to be the last row that we're going to work on camera, is where we're going to start repeating the steps from the beginning. So my pattern says that we need to start from row 2. So what did we do in row 2? We chained 1, turn the work 1 single crochet in the first 3 stitches, 1, 2, 3, chain 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Skip your chains and starting from the first stitch, work your 6 single crochet. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Again, chain 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Skip your chains, starting from the first stitch, work the last 3 single crochet. 1, 2, 3. So these were the repetitions of row number 2. Of row number 2, which was the first row of repetitions. Then I'm going to do the repetitions of row 3, of row 4, where again they're going to give me 3 chain 7 loops. And then in row 5, which is the last row of repetitions, I'm going to close my bows in the same exact way we did in the previous row. So I'm going to go ahead and work a few more rows off camera. And when I turn my video back on, we're going to see how our project looks like. And as we have done on the previous video, we're going to see how by using this sample we can calculate to create a bigger project. I have worked extra rows with our bows and look how beautiful our project looks like at this point. Now, since we have finished our projects, whatever you're crocheting, a blanket, a scarf, whatever you're making, we want to crochet the last rows. I want the end of my project to look exactly like the beginning over here. Okay, it's not going to look nice if you just finish with the bows. So what we're going to do is we're going to repeat row 2. So I'm going to chain 1, turn my work, okay, work 3 single crochet, starting from the first stitch, 1, 2, and 3, chain 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Skip your chains and starting from the first stitch, work your 6 single crochet, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Chain 7, 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Skip your chains and work the last 3 single crochet of the row. 1, 2, and 3. And now we're going to work the last row. So I'm going to chain 1, turn the work. I'm going to start with my 3 single crochet as always. 1, 2, 3. And what I'm going to do in this row is I'm going to work 1 single crochet in each one of my chains. So starting from the first chain right over here, 1, next chain, 2, next one, 3, next one, 4, next one, 5, 6, and my last chain, 7. Okay, now work your 6 single crochet. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And again, work 1 single crochet in each of the 7 chains, starting from the first one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the last chain, 7, and finish the row with the last 3 stitches. 1, 2, and the last stitch, 3. So whatever you're making, if you have finished your project, chain 1, cut the yarn and fasten off. And see how the last row is exactly like the first one. And this is the result of our project, of our stitch. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to see how to calculate the stitches if we want to create a bigger project. And when you want to calculate how many stitches are going to give you the length, do not count the last 2 and the first row in this measurement. Those 3 rows, you're going to leave them off because you're going to change the measurements and your stitch count is going to come out totally wrong. Okay, so we're going to just add them in the end, and it's only 3 rows. Okay, so what are they going to add 1 or 2 centimeters, like half an inch in the end, okay, of your measurements? So when you calculate how many stitches gave you the 10 centimeters or the 4 inches, just count the rows of the bows. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bows. Each bow is made out of 4 rows, so I have 20 rows. And now the width, it's not exactly 4 inches, 10 centimeters. It's 13.5, okay? And even if I took only 1 bow, it's like 6.5 centimeters. So we're going to see how by having a wider than 10 centimeters, how we're going to do the calculations, which are going to be exactly the same. Okay, so let's do our calculations now. Now let's see how to calculate the number of stitches that we need and the total rows for a bigger project. Okay, so let's say that we want to crochet a blanket that's 30 inches by 30 inches. Now I need to know my stitch, I need to know my rule, which is 13 plus 1, and I need to know my repeating rows, which is row 2 to row 5, that's a total of 4 rows. I need to know my gauge, which is 26 stitches give me 5.4 inches, and 20 rows give me 4 inches height, okay, length. Now, it's also important to write down the crochet hook that you're using and the yarn. This way, if you want to go back to your, for a reference to your calculations, if you have done the sample and the calculations with a certain yarn and a crochet hook, just so you don't have to do it over again. Now let's start, and first of all we want to see how many chains to start with. Since I'm working with chains, this is the width of my project, so this means that I'm going to use the width from the calculations for the width that I need for my project. Okay, so the stitches from the gauge, in this case 26 stitches, times the inches that I want, and since I'm looking for width, I'm going to use the 30 inches for the width, divided by the width of my gauge. In this case, it's 5.4. Okay, so I'm using these calculations over here, those numbers over here. So let's put in our numbers. The stitches from the gauge are 26 times the inches that I want, 30 for the width, divided that number by the width of my gauge, which is 5.4. Okay, so let's do our calculations. 26 times 30, it's 780 divided by 5.4. Divided by 5.4. And the result is 144.4. Now these are the chains that I need to start with. Of course, I cannot start with 144.4 chains, and since my decimal number is smaller than 0.5, now what this would mean that if I would start subtracting stitches to have the correct number of chains, this means that I would start subtracting because the decimal point is smaller than 0.5. If it was bigger than 0.5, I would start adding stitches. Okay, but just so I'm not confusing you, what I mean is, of course, we cannot have a decimal as our stitches. So if I would start with 144 chains, this means that because I have a multiple of 13 as my rule over here, if I divide 144 by 13, I need to get a whole number as a result. So let's see, 144 divided by 13, the result is 11.07. So that's still a decimal point, and this means that 144 chains are not the right number of chains that I need to start my work with because it's not a multiple of 13. So if I subtract one stitch and I do 143 chains divided by 13, there we go. 143 chains divided by 13, the result is 11. It's a whole number. So this means if I start with 143 chains, my multiple 13 would come out right, and I would have all the bows that I need. Okay, so if I would still had a decimal point, I would subtract another stitch and I would do 142 divided by 13 and so on. Okay, the number of chains need to be a multiple of 13 in this case. But do not forget that in order to go to row 1, we need an extra chain over here, my +1. So in order to get a 30-inch width, I'm going to start my project with 144 chains. Okay. Now let's see the number of rows that we're going to need for our project to be a 30-inch length. So I need to get the rows of my gauge. In this case, it's 20 times the inches that I want, since I'm looking for the length, I'm using this number over here, and I'm going to divide that number by the length of my gauge. In this case, it's 4 inches. Okay, so the rows of my gauge, I worked 20 rows, oops, just a 20, times the inches that I want. I need 30 inches over here, and I'm going to divide that number by 4 because the length of my gauge is 4 inches. So 600 divided by 4, and the result is 150. So when I did my division over here, this means that I need 150 rows to reach the 30-inch length. Now it's very important to remember that we need to go back to our rule up here, and my repeating rows are 2 to 5. This means that I'm repeating a total of 4 rows, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now this means that if I do 150 divided by 4, I need again a whole number as a result. And this is because I need to know that if I crochet 150 rows, that up until the end, I'm still going to be getting all my repetitions for the bows. Okay, so when I do 150 divided by 4, the result is 37.5. Now 37.5 is a decimal, and this means that I'm going to get a 37.5 bows. Of course, I can have a half of a bow as I'm working my project, so this means in order to get a whole bow, the whole thing, I need to either add or subtract rows. And in this case, because the result is 37.5, it's, in my opinion, if I'm going to add or subtract, okay, because it's 0.5, so it's exactly in the center, the decimal. So it's going to be your opinion if you're going to add a few rows or if you're going to subtract a few rows. I'm going to add a few rows because it's better to have an extra inch on your length than to have a smaller project. So if I add 1 row to this, if I do 151 divided by 4, the result is 37.75. I'm still getting a decimal. If I add an extra row, if I work 152 rows divided by 4, the result is 38. This means the 38 that I just mentioned, this means that as I go through my rows, I'm going to have a total of 38 bows. So if I work 152 rows, okay, now along with this 152 rows, I'm going to have the 1 extra row in the beginning, which is 153, and the 2 extra rows in the end. I'm going to have 155 rows in total. But as of my bows, I need 152 rows to get a total of 38 bows. So this is how we do our calculations for our bow stitch. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and if you like the video, please press like and leave a comment. Thanks again. Bye bye.